Imagine waking up with a gentle, consistent vitality coursing through you even before your feet touch the floor. Not the jittery rush of caffeine, but a deep-seated vigor. It's the kind of energy that sharpens your intellect and primes your physique. You approach the day as an opportunity to seize, rather than merely endure. Alertness comes naturally, focus without struggle. There's an underlying assurance, a quiet self-possession, an intuition that you're prepared for whatever challenges arise. Most men recall experiencing this sensation, perhaps in their early 20s, or fleetingly in their 30s. Then, gradually, without a single defining event, it recedes. Mornings feel more burdensome. Thoughts take longer to coalesce. By mid-afternoon, you're craving coffee, sugar, anything to maintain functionality. You continue to meet your obligations, to do what's necessary, yet something essential feels absent. You gaze into the mirror and perceive not weakness, but bewilderment. You ponder the disappearance of that former self. And here's the unspoken truth. This isn't about motivation or discipline, nor is it a sudden onset of indolence. This is fundamentally biological. What if your daily lifestyle, diet, and bodily fuel are subtly dismantling the very systems that once imbued you with power? Because once this realization sinks in, your entire understanding of energy, testosterone, and male hormones begins to shift. Initially, it doesn't manifest as a malfunction. It simply feels like the new normal. You rationalize, this is just adulthood. Demanding days, incessant pressure, a body requiring more upkeep than before. Everyone feels tired, right? So, you adjust. You push through. You layer caffeine upon sleep deprivation. You snack between meals, believing it stabilizes your energy. When your concentration wanes or your drive diminishes, you attribute it to stress, aging, or simply the unpredictable nature of life. But here's an uncomfortable fact. Feeling mentally clouded, lethargic, and reliant on external stimulation didn't become normal because it's healthy. It became normal because it's widespread. We've crafted an environment where men are seldom truly rested, rarely metabolically quiescent, and never permitted to experience hunger without immediately quelling it. Food is ceaselessly available. Screens are perpetually illuminated. Dopamine relentlessly floods the system. When your body is perpetually nourished and perpetually stimulated, it never gets an opportunity to reset. Hormones don't regenerate. Signals remain muddled. Everything sustains a slight elevation, a subtle inflammation, a minor imbalance. You're not failing to keep pace. Your system is overwhelmed. Once you grasp that this condition didn't emerge overnight, it opens the door to a more unsettling inquiry. What if the very advice intended to invigorate you is precisely what's holding you back? Superficially, it all seems responsible. Eat breakfast, don't skip meals, maintain stable blood sugar, fuel your body every few hours to prevent your metabolism from slowing. This counsel is ubiquitous. In fitness publications, doctors' offices, social media feeds, and repeated so frequently it seems unimpeachable, and most men adhere to it diligently, assuming consistency equates to well-being. But here's the flaw. This advice was never formulated for a world of constant food access, chronic stress, and non-stop stimulation. When you eat from dawn until late night, your body never experiences metabolic quiet. It's perpetually processing, constantly responding, always reacting. There's no pause, no reset, no chance for your internal signals to recalibrate. Instead of fostering stable energy, incessant fueling often creates dependency. You're not energized, you're managed. You're borrowing focus from the next snack, the next coffee, the next quick energy boost. Over time, that continuous influx stops supporting your system and begins to inundate it. The engine isn't underfed, it's flooded. Once this idea takes root, a new question becomes impossible to ignore. What transpires within your body when the signal to cease eating never arrives? When most people hear insulin, they associate it with fat storage or diabetes, something extreme, something that happens to others. But insulin's true impact isn't about extremes. It's about what occurs when insulin never gets a chance to decrease. Every time you consume food, insulin levels rise. This is normal and healthy. The difficulty arises when meals are stacked upon snacks, and snacks upon drinks, and your bloodstream never experiences a period of calm. Insulin remains elevated hour after hour, a constant background hum. And that hum is significant, because insulin doesn't merely transport nutrients, it governs the entire hormonal communication within your body. Your brain transmits signals to your testes through a delicate sequence of communication. Produce, repair, sustain drive, uphold strength. However, chronically elevated insulin disrupts this process. It acts like an unyielding gatekeeper. The message fails to arrive. The signal weakens. Testosterone production doesn't dramatically crash. It merely ebbs, slowly, imperceptibly. This explains why many men lift heavy, supplement aggressively, and still feel sluggish. The issue isn't effort, it's signal interference. And here's a crucial distinction. This isn't about self-deprivation or an aversion to food. It's about re-establishing rhythm. Because without rhythm, even the most robust system begins to malfunction. And when men finally attempt to restore that rhythm, this is where discomfort arises. This is the point where most men give up. They shorten their eating window, skip a meal, or try fasting. Within days, everything feels worse. Energy plummets, muscles appear flat, mood sours, libido goes quiet, and the immediate conclusion is self-evident. I'm ruining my hormones. So, they cease. They revert to eating every few hours, relieved as the discomfort subsides, convinced that fasting simply doesn't work for them. But this conclusion misses the true underlying process. When you abruptly remove constant fuel, your body doesn't interpret it as optimization. It interprets it as uncertainty. From a biological perspective, disappearing food signals danger. And when danger emerges, your nervous system acts precisely as designed. It prioritizes survival. Your adrenal glands release cortisol. Alertness increases. Restlessness sets in. Testosterone temporarily recedes. Not because something is broken, but because your body is choosing between reproduction and survival. Survival invariably triumphs in the short term. This is not failure. This is the stress gap, the transitional phase where old signals shut down before new ones activate. Almost everyone who quits does so here, just before the shift, mistaking adaptation for harm. This misunderstanding keeps them ensnared in the very cycle they strive to escape. Here's why this phase is so frequently misunderstood. We've been instructed to view cortisol as the adversary, a stress hormone to be eradicated at all costs. But cortisol isn't malicious. It's primordial. It's part of the same survival software that sustained your ancestors long before supermarkets and protein bars existed. When food became scarce, the body didn't shut down. It sharpened. Cortisol amplified focus, heightened awareness, and propelled movement. It made men restless, alert, and driven to action. That uncomfortable edge you feel isn't a malfunction. It's a signal that your nervous system has entered hunt mode. Testosterone temporarily dips, not because it's gone, but because the body is reallocating resources. Muscle building and reproduction can wait. Finding food cannot. This is where context matters. The body doesn't yet comprehend that this break in eating is deliberate. All it knows is that a familiar pattern has been disrupted. Once it realizes food will return, albeit on a different rhythm, the emergency signal begins to fade. And as cortisol recedes, something far more potent takes its place. That moment marks the actual turning point, and almost no one persists long enough to reach it. This is where the conversation finally evolves. Most men believe everything hinges on numbers: total testosterone, lab results, reference ranges. But how you feel isn't dictated by the sheer quantity of testosterone you possess. It's determined by how effectively your body can perceive it. Every cell responsive to testosterone possesses an androgen receptor. Envision these receptors as docking stations. When testosterone binds to them, that's when you experience strength, drive, clarity, and that unmistakable sense of forward momentum. However, when insulin is chronically elevated due to constant eating, those receptors begin to become desensitized. The signal becomes noisy. It's not that testosterone vanishes, it's that the message fails to register. When you establish metabolic quiet through fasting, that noise dissipates, insulin levels drop, the background interference clears, and suddenly those receptors reawaken. They regain sensitivity, becoming responsive once more. Even average testosterone levels begin to produce extraordinary effects. This is why many men report feeling dramatically different, even when their blood work shows minimal change. The system isn't producing more, it's utilizing what it has with greater efficacy. This is the moment men describe as feeling switched on. Focus sharpens, confidence stabilizes, energy stops oscillating between peaks and crashes. You're no longer pursuing stimulation, you're generating it internally. And as this sensitivity returns, another powerful system silently accelerates in the background. One that preserves muscle, incinerates fat, and reinforces everything testosterone aims to accomplish. This is where apprehension overtakes most men. Skip meals, and the immediate mental image is of muscle wasting away. Years of gym culture have deeply ingrained this notion. Miss protein for a few hours, and your body turns cannibalistic. That narrative sounds logical, but it's incorrect. When you fast, your body doesn't panic. It establishes priorities. One of the initial systems to escalate is growth hormone, and its surge is considerable. Research indicates elevations measured in hundreds, occasionally thousands of % following prolonged fasting periods. Growth hormone's function is preservation. It safeguards lean tissue, mobilizes fat for energy, and maintains your structural integrity when calorie intake is low. Simultaneously, autophagy intensifies. The term literally signifies self-eating, which sounds alarming until one comprehends what is actually being consumed. Your body isn't incinerating valuable muscle. It is eliminating damaged proteins, malfunctioning cells, and metabolic debris that has accumulated over years. Envision refinement, not devastation. The more slender appearance some men observe early on is not muscle atrophy. It is the depletion of glycogen and a reduction in inflammation. Water exits the tissue. Swelling diminishes. What remains is denser, firmer muscle beneath. You are not shrinking. You are becoming more refined. And as your body purges and retains what is essential, another enhancement begins to manifest. One that is unrelated to one's physical appearance and entirely connected to one's thought processes. As the body adapts to this new rhythm, the alteration that astonishes most men is not physical. It is mental. The constant background commotion starts to subside. That restless impulse to check your device, grab a snack, or seek stimulation loosens its hold. Your brain achieves a quietude it hasn't experienced in years. During fasting, levels of norepinephrine and dopamine shift in a very specific manner, not towards apprehension, but towards exactitude. Focus narrows. Distractions lose their allure. You feel vigilant without feeling agitated. This is what many men refer to as hunt mode. Not aggression for its own sake, but clarity coupled with purpose. There is a reason this state feels so innate. Evolution designed the male nervous system to perform optimally when resources were scarce. When sustenance was uncertain, Men who became more perceptive, more decisive, and more motivated survived. Fasting accesses that same neural pathway. It restores sensitivity to dopamine instead of saturating it. In a world of ceaseless stimulation, screens, sugar, pornography, notifications, most dopamine systems are desensitized. Nothing feels gratifying anymore. Fasting compels a recalibration. Ordinary experiences begin to register again. Motivation returns. You don't need to pursue the next thrill. You are sufficiently present to generate momentum independently. And as your mind sharpens and your energy stabilizes, another subtle transformation occurs beneath the surface. One that reconfigures your long-term hormonal prospects. Here is an element of the enigma almost entirely overlooked, despite its quiet influence on everything. Body fat is not merely stored energy, it is hormonally active tissue. And the fat of paramount importance is not the kind you can grasp. It is the visceral fat encasing your organs, particularly in the abdominal region. That fat contains an enzyme called aromatase. Aromatase converts testosterone into estrogen. The more visceral fat you carry, the more testosterone silently exits your system and is redirected into a hormone that counteracts male drive, recovery, and body composition. This is not conjecture. It is biochemistry. When fasting lowers insulin and compels your body to burn stored fat, aromatase activity decreases. Less conversion occurs. Testosterone remains testosterone. Not because you introduced something new, but because you ceased losing what you already possessed. It's akin to sealing a fissure in a dam instead of endeavoring to pump in more water. This is why fat loss achieved through fasting feels distinct from fat loss through perpetual restriction. Hormones begin to cooperate with you instead of opposing you. Your physical presentation becomes more defined, more resolute, more steadfast. And now, the inquiry most men are reluctant to pose finally comes into focus. If all of this is transpiring beneath the surface, what kind of man does this mold you into over the long term? Take a broader perspective for a moment and consider the comprehensive view. This was never solely about fasting. It was never solely about testosterone, insulin, or hormones on a laboratory report. This is about trajectory. Most men merely drift into the same future without ever consciously choosing it. More visceral fat, less energy, greater reliance on stimulants, prescriptions, and routines that maintain functionality, but never true power. They label it aging, but what it truly represents is a loss of metabolic regulation. Now, contrast that with the alternative, a body that understands how to switch fuel sources instead of panicking. Hormones that communicate clearly instead of struggling through interference. A nervous system that is not dominated by incessant dopamine surges. This is metabolic adaptability. This is hormonal resilience. This is masculine energy restored at the biological level. And here is the most crucial statement. Hunger is not an exigency. It is information. When you cease reacting to it instantaneously, you cease being controlled by it. That discipline accrues. Self-control in the physical realm translates into self-control in every other aspect. That is sovereignty. This does not imply never indulging in food. Fasting is important. Connection is important. Celebration is important. But fasting serves as the counterweight, the reset that prevents abundance from leading to deterioration, expansion, and contraction. Feasting and fasting. That rhythm forms the bedrock of a robust existence. So if this has reconfigured your perception of your body, do not disregard that indication. Ponder it. Test it. Begin modestly. Postpone your first meal tomorrow by 1 hour. Nothing extreme, just enough to remind your system who is in command. You did not come here for amusement. You came here to recall who you are.